We are skipping the usual introduction today because a geopolitical shockwave of this magnitude demands that we get straight to the point. Imagine a world where the mountains that once symbolized absolute rock-solid safety suddenly become the backdrop for military alarms. A country built entirely on staying out of the fight is forced directly into the fire.
Okay, let's dive into this completely unimaginable breaking news scenario right now. What happens when the center of Europe stops being a bystander and becomes an active participant in a continental crisis? Think about it. A nation that built its entire modern identity on defense, precision, and careful distance from other people's conflicts is suddenly taking sides in a war that is literally tearing the continent apart.
Phase 1, the unthinkable happens. The immediate reaction across the continent, and really the entire world, would be sheer disbelief. That would be rapidly followed by a desperate scramble by governments and markets to understand exactly how the unthinkable actually became reality. Did they choose intervention or were they forced? Every single answer changes the story, but the baseline reality remains exactly the same. Europe has entered a phase where absolutely no one is outside the danger zone.
To truly grasp why this is so earth-shattering, you have to look at what is fundamentally breaking here. We aren't just talking about a legal status on a piece of paper. We're talking about the shocking collapse of a deeply ingrained political symbol. For generations, Swiss neutrality has represented this comforting idea that a small state can survive among larger powers simply by being disciplined, prepared, and strategically neutral. It's the ultimate anchor of European stability.
Now, what's really interesting here is that a cautious country like Switzerland wouldn't just jump in lightly, right? Their political tradition is way too measured for that. It would require an absolutely extreme trigger to force their hand. We're talking about defending against direct border threats, a severe airspace violation, massive state-sponsored cyber attacks, or a humanitarian disaster so catastrophic that staying out is just no longer a moral or practical option.
Phase 2, activating the Alpine fortress. Once that threshold is crossed, whatever the exact trigger might be, the narrative instantly shifts from political shock to intense, highly organized military mobilization. Because, make no mistake, Switzerland is fiercely neutral, but it is absolutely not weak. They would instantly revert to their historic national redoubt strategy, basically retreating to and heavily defending the mountains. Switzerland's unique geography actually gives it enormous advantages, essentially acting as a massive weapon of deterrence. They rely on formidable mountain ranges, strategic passes, and heavily fortified terrain. They have designed what is probably one of the most difficult environments in all of Europe for an invading army to navigate. We're talking thousands of transit tunnels, bridges, and roads that are pre-engineered to be blown up at a moment's notice. It's literally a geographic shield. So the really crucial question here becomes their military posture. Are they simply acting as a defensive shield, protecting their own borders and turning that geography into an impenetrable fortress? Or are they a coalition participant, actively joining a broader military coordination? If it's the latter, the Alpine heart of Europe suddenly becomes a strategic actor aiming to alter the entire continental balance. Let's look at how this builds at the civilian level, where those famous Swiss institutional habits immediately kick in. They would deliver clear emergency messaging, protect transportation networks, and activate their vast nationwide network of bunkers. Get this, Switzerland is so prepared that they have enough nuclear fallout shelter capacity to house over 114% of their entire population. That's right, more than their actual population. They plan for the absolute worst, so the public would expect total order, even amidst the chaos of war. Phase 3, global financial tremors. But listen, even with perfect domestic order, the external fallout would be instantaneous and severe. As the military mobilization takes hold in the Alps, massive shockwaves would instantly shatter the calm of global financial markets around the world. The sudden evaporation of market confidence would be palpable. This quote perfectly captures it. A country that is perceived as calm and safe in a war is one thing. A country that is now part of the war is something else entirely. Investors would immediately panic. They'd start questioning if their capital is truly safe anywhere. If Swiss banking isn't immune, the entire foundation of global financial safety suddenly looks incredibly fragile. The financial impacts would be absolutely brutal. We'd see global capital safety questioned across the board. Unprecedented pressure on the Swiss franc, massive spikes in global insurance costs, and a rapid institutional recalculation of risk. This sends a really stark signal worldwide that this conflict is no longer just a regional issue. It's a full-blown global economic event. And the financial panic is just the beginning. Phase 4, the continental chain reaction.
With banks panicking, the physical reality of a mobilized Switzerland begins to literally choke the logistical arteries of Europe. Because Switzerland physically touches all these major strategic spheres, France, Germany, Italy, Austria, and Liechtenstein, its wartime status forces every single neighboring state to completely rethink their troop movements, border defense, and supply lines, basically overnight. It's a total geographical bottleneck.
This brilliantly illustrates exactly how modern war is fought, through logistics. You're disrupting vital transalpine train and truck shipping routes, cutting off critical energy flow connections, and halting massive amounts of industrial transport. This forces companies and governments to scramble for emergency alternatives. Even crucial humanitarian corridors could be bottlenecked in the mountains, fundamentally changing how the whole continent operates. Phase 5, the diplomatic void. As those immediate logistical and financial fires burn across the continent, a massive, quiet problem emerges for the international community. The contrast here is devastating. Before the crisis, Switzerland was the reliable venue for peace talks, secret back channels, and humanitarian coordination. But during the crisis, you have a total loss of neutral ground. Political channels narrow rapidly, and diplomacy hardens right when the world needs a mediator the most. By losing Switzerland, international diplomacy just becomes significantly harder, and those trusted channels for peace rapidly disappear. And the implications ripple outward across all broad alliances. Even without Switzerland being in NATO, its involvement forces Brussels and Washington into unprecedented coordination, simply because the map of European politics has fundamentally bent. The EU scrambles to assess trade and transit protection. NATO coordinates way closer on airspace and posture, and the US has to engage in rapid diplomatic intervention to try and contain the fallout.
Phase 6, a new European reality. Eventually, the immediate shock would pass. But as the dust begins to settle, we have to examine the permanent psychological toll this leaves on the continent's identity.
Because even if peace returns, the post-war identity shift is permanent. The old assumption of guaranteed safety? Broken. Neutrality is no longer an untouched tradition. The memory of their participation alters long-term strategic thinking forever. It proves that in times of massive pressure, no flag stays perfectly outside the flames. Once a safe space becomes a strategic space, you can never fully go back to the way things were.
Which leaves us right here. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to take away from this explainer today. If the ultimate symbol of stability can be pulled into the fire, what does that mean for the rest of us? Seriously, if the calmest place in Europe goes to war, is anyone ever truly safe?